Robert Joseph Tennison, Bobby to those who knew him best, was a 37-year-old from Keys, California. He was the father of four and worked in construction. On January 19, 2009, he went north with his son and a friend to Alderpoint, California, to sell a motorcycle. He told the two he'd take the bus home after collecting a debt. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Dead Man's Curve, Skull Island, The Forbidden Forest, Dark City. These are the scary names of places you've heard of. They come from a song, a couple of movies, and a book. I only listed 4, but there are hundreds if not thousands of names like this from all cultures and languages. Yet they are all fictional. Yes, there may be a curve in a road somewhere that's caused fatal accidents. And I'm guessing there is an island out there that has a skull on it. But they all came from an author's, a songwriter's, or an artist's mind. All for the purposes of adding intrigue, mystery, and suspicion to the story they're trying to tell. I bring this up because in the case of Bobby Tennison, he vanished from an area of California where disappearances are common. In fact, Unfound has visited this area before, with the episode on Jeff Joseph. It is a real place that seemingly continues to earn its sinister name from the locals. The question is, did Bobby perish there, or did something else happen up on Murder Mountain? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's site, charlieproject.org. Bobby Tennison was a happy-go-lucky guy from Keys, California. He had 4 sons by 2 different women and was close with his mother. Starting in his early 20s, he became a carpenter and somewhat of a jack of all trades. In fact, in certain circles, he was known as Bob the Builder. And starting in his early 30s, Bobby began making trips to Northern California for work, mostly to the area of Alderpoint. He made many friends there, and they allowed Bobby to stay in their homes while he was there. So on January 19th, 2009, there were no concerns as Bobby, his son Robert, and friend Andrew took Andrew's motorcycle to Alderpoint to be sold to someone Bobby knew. The sale went off without a hitch. Bobby then showed his son and friend around the town before parting company. Bobby told them he'd be back to Keys in a couple days after collecting a debt. He claimed to take the bus back, something he'd done many times before. According to later accounts, Bobby then went to a friend's house, then was picked up by another guy he knew. After this, Bobby was never seen again. The investigation of Bobby's disappearance has been hampered by the following issues. Number 1, no one to this day knows who owed Bobby money. Number 2, the brother of a person of interest in Bobby's disappearance is a murderer. And number 3, a suicide note that allegedly reveals what happened to Bobby has never been allowed to be viewed by the Tennison family. Bobby's family does not believe the story of the last person to see Bobby. They believe foul play was involved. The interview for this episode is with Bobby's cousin, Tammy Langford. Unfound news. No new news this week due to me recording this episode almost immediately after last week's program due to me traveling to Orlando earlier this week. So look for new news next week. Got that? Where you can find Unfound. Unfound is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify. Concerning Facebook, please join us on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for the Unfound live show on the Unfound page. And I also need to thank, once again, all of those people using the Podomatic app. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The website, unfoundpodcast.com. The website at Trib Total Media, triblive.com/news/unfound. Unfound has a Patreon account, patreon.com/unfound podcast. You automatically get access to the private Unfound blog, and you get a free ebook with a $2 per month contribution. The PayPal account, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Unfound Merchandise, Volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Amazon in both paperback and ebook form. If you've bought them, please give them some nice reviews. The playing cards at makeplayingcards.com. Just do a search for Unfound. Search for almost all of Unfound's cases at myshopify.com. And please mention Unfound on all true crime Facebook pages and other websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the cousin of Bobby Tennison, Tammy Lankford. Tammy, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start here. I'm guessing we don't have too many cousins on Unfound, so tell the listeners how you are related to Bobby, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Bobby is my cousin. His mother and my mother are siblings, and we grew up together in the same town, went to school together in the same classrooms, and were really close growing up.
Okay, so you weren't just cousins, but you were even, I guess, close to the same age.
Yeah, we're a year apart, but we were eventually ended up in the same grade.
Okay, so you knew him very well. You grew up with him. That must have been nice.
It was.
And this is in Keys, California?
Yes.
How do you remember Bobby? Of course, you, I guess, knew him from a very young age. What are some of the words that you'd use to describe Bobby? And maybe you can give the listeners maybe a certain event or something that you and Bobby shared and experience for the listeners. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that. Bobby was a big-hearted person with a easygoing personality. He was funny, liked to joke. He was a hard worker. Worked since we were young. Just enjoyed family, friends, and just kind of easygoing, laid back lifestyle basically. We were friends, more than just cousins. We were friends. He was one of my closest friends growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the kind of person who was protective of those that he cared about, and always kind of there to make sure things were going well. When you were out, and we used to ride our bikes together. When I got older, I had a little motorized scooter. We used to ride that around town all the time together, hanging out and just being kids. And
sure.
One of the things that was always we always kind of laugh about, looking back, is because our school here was really little. So when we went into high school, we had to go into a larger school. And I can remember being new to that school and, meeting new people. And, as you're at that age where you're starting to want to date and things like that. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that he was telling people no, like they couldn't date me, that kind of stuff. Like that's how he was.
So he was like a little bit protective of you. No guy was good enough for you, I guess, Tammy.
Kind of, in a way, yeah. But that's how he was with us, with his cousins, that were close to him and stuff. So it was like funny. It's like a joke when I look back now, and I'm like, oh, well, gee, I would have liked to have that decision myself. But that's kind of how he was. He just a very caring person.
That's a very cool story. Thank you for sharing that, Tammy. Very nice. Did Bobby have brothers and sisters that you knew well as well?
Yes. Bobby has two brothers with his mom, and then he has another brother and two sisters from a biological father as well.
Okay, so some brothers, some sisters. And did you know them as well as you knew Bobby, or did you and he kind of have a special bond being that you were around the same age?
Some of them siblings are close to our age as well.
Okay.
And yes, they all lived here in the same town, so we were all close.
Okay, in Keys, California, not a very big town, not a big city at all.
Very small.
Very small. Just to give the listeners an idea, roughly how many students were in your graduating class in your high school, would you say?
Well, we had to go to high school outside of Keys. We had to go to high school in Turlock, but um, gosh, back then I'm not even sure how many were in there,
Okay.
but probably less than 500.
Okay. Okay. All right. So he has you two are very close, high school, into your teenage years, and he has some brothers and some sisters. And what happens maybe when you get into your 20s? I'm from my notes here. I know he got into, I don't know if you call it home building or being a carpenter. In fact, he was known as Bob the Builder. Must have been good with his hands in building things.
Yeah, well, as I got into my 20s, I was working and putting myself through college, and he didn't go to college. He was just working, and eventually started having children and things. So our lives were a little bit different until our 20s.
Okay.
But we still lived here in the same town and stuff. Didn't necessarily see each other every day because life happens. But
Sure.
he did work in the construction industry for years. As far as being called Bob the Builder, that was something that was not here. We didn't call him that.
Okay.
That was a name that someone else gave him, later.
Okay. Now you said that he had kids, and one of his sons is going to play a prominent part in this interview, in this episode. How many children did he have? Was Bobby married? Did he get divorced? What was going on in
He
there with
wasn't.
his life?
Yeah, he wasn't married, but he did have 4 sons by 2 different women. His oldest son he had when he was young, like in his early 20s, and
Mm.
then later he had 3 more children with his um, girlfriend, significant other, for several years. Uh, so they all lived here in the same town. So all 4 of his boys were here.
Okay. And I should mention that Bobby was born the same year I was, 1970, but he disappeared in 2009. So he was roughly 38, 39 years old at the time of his disappearance.
Bobby was born in 71.
71. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, the information I have here, he was born in 1970. Well, that's interesting. The listeners show that Tammy and I have not talked about that particular fact before. Okay, because I have his birth date here as September 11th, coincidentally, 1970. Are you saying it's 1971?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is interesting. I'll have to get to the bottom of that. Okay. So he was roughly then 38 when he disappeared?
Correct.
Okay. So he had 4 sons, 38 years old. Born and grew up in Keys, California. You're his cousin, but you were best friends. He was looking out for you. You kind of took different paths, but I'm sure you still were friends. You going to school, him starting a family. Now, where did the connection to Humboldt County and Alderpoint get started? And the listeners should know that these areas are roughly about 5 hours north of Keys, California. How did that all start? Do you have any idea?
What I know of that, I don't know the exact year that he started going up there, but there were people that used to live here in Keys that he was friends with. That I didn't hang out with them, but they were a little bit younger than me. But they grew up here and they had moved up to that area, and he used to go up there. That's who we knew up there and who we started going to see. And I think he later, from going up there, had met other people up there and made friendships with people up there.
Okay. So this would have been something after.
Went up there.
Okay. So periodically. So this had been something that started like after high school, like you said, in his 20s, maybe when he started his family, somewhere around that time.
The best I can guess is it may have been somewhere around 2005 that he was going up there. It could have been earlier than that, but I couldn't really pin down.
Okay, so much later than possibly in his 20s. Okay. So he started going up there, Humboldt County, knew people that grew up in Keys that had moved up there. And we just maybe should just put this on the record right now because this is a topic that's come up before on this on Unfound with a variety of disappearances that we've covered. In fact, one in particular with Jeff Joseph. Is it possible, and we're not here to judge, Bobby might have been involved in some marijuana growing up in Humboldt County in that area, got involved in that at some time? Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible.
Okay. But it sounds to me, if we're to believe that he didn't start going up there until the 2000s, maybe that was something that was relatively new to him, possibly.
Possibly. I really don't know a whole lot about that.
Okay. Just a couple people that we need to mention right at this point. We're going to be mentioning a lot of different names, so listeners may have to try to keep all of these people straight in their heads. But the Gans, their last name is Gann, Virginia and Dustin. Who are they?
I don't know them personally, but they are people who live up there that he was friends with, and that he would go up there and stay with them.
He would stay with them, so he must have gotten to know them pretty well.
I would think so. Otherwise, I don't believe he would have stayed with them.
Right. Okay. Are these a couple of the people that might have been originally from Keys, or do you believe that they are?
No,
they're not from
they're
Keys.
Not from, no.
Okay. And Virginia and Dustin, are they close in age to Bobby, or is Virginia is Dustin's mother? Is she like a lot older than Bobby and Dustin's younger? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Had you ever heard of their names at any point before Bobby disappeared?
No, I had not.
Okay. So he'd been going up there. He disappeared in 2009. Let's just say that he'd been going up there. And we'd mentioned earlier Bob the Builder. It was actually him going up to this area of Humboldt County, Alderpoint, is the people up there who actually kind of gave him that nickname.
Correct.
Okay. That's where he got that nickname. Not in Keys, but up in that area. So he's going up there, but mainly he was staying down in Keys. What was he doing? I guess it would have been in his 30s, between, let's say, 2000 and 2009. What was his official work around the Keys area?
He'd always been in the construction industry, but at the time, I don't believe he was currently employed when he left.
When he disappeared. Okay. Okay.
He'd been staying with his mom.
Okay. And I realize that, and the listeners have to realize, and we'll get into this a little bit more deeply later, is that although you were friends with Bobby, very close to him at one time and everything, that a lot of these things about this disappearance you didn't find out till afterwards. And in fact, you didn't even know that he went missing until like 5 weeks after he went missing.
That's correct.
All right, and the listeners, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit and why that might have been. But what you know now, in 2018, was he having any problems up there with anyone? Was he ever threatened? And in our last conversation, there was a rumor that maybe somebody had said for him not to go up there again in like December of 2008. And of course, he disappeared in January of 2009. Anything to that? We'll get a little bit deeper, but was he having any problems up there, to your knowledge, that you've heard about?
No, and that's what made the whole thing odd.
Okay.
But a lot of rumors go around and stuff, and that was something that was said, that someone had came here and told him not to come there. But nobody ever can tell you who, like why or any details to it. So it's hard to know, like, was that true or was it false?
Okay. Once again, I realize you weren't, automatically keeping tabs on him by the time he got into his 30s, but from what you know now, how often do you think he was going up to the Humboldt County in maybe the months before he disappeared? Maybe once a month or once every 2 months? How often do you think he was going up there?
I'm really not certain, but I think maybe he only went up there like a couple times, like maybe, I don't know, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 times a year, if that.
3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, I don't think it was like monthly or anything like that.
Okay. And so he's going up there, and the belief is that when he would go up there, he would stay with a variety of people up there. But Dustin and Virginia Gann were two of the more prominent people that he might stay with, that he was friends with when he'd go up there?
Yeah, they're the only people that of course, I don't know any other people up there either, but they're the only people I was aware of that he would stay. That's where he would go.
Okay. How were things going for if he? I mean, you said he was unemployed, but he had 4 kids. I mean, was he a little tight for money? Do you think, in possibly the year before he disappeared? What do you think?
Well, I'm sure he was living with his parents, and he had separated from his girlfriend, and her children were living, I think, at the time with her parents. So yeah, they were going through some struggles.
So he was having some issues. But to your knowledge, I know he might have been in the marijuana business going up there, but to your knowledge, did Bobby have any addictions? Any drug addictions, any alcohol addictions, anything that, might have otherwise gotten him in trouble?
Anything's possible. I mean, I'm not going to act like he's never, done a drug in his life, because he has. But as far as, I mean, he's not an alcoholic or anything like that.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm asking is, here are some of the drugs that often pop up in the missing persons cases that I cover. A meth addiction, addiction to opiates like heroin or prescription medication, anything like that to your knowledge that you've ever heard about regarding Bobby?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's go to that day, January 19th, 2009. Nothing, once again, not seemingly anything unusual going on. Maybe some rumors out there that I think we'll get into later. But we come to January 19th, 2009. And for the listeners, just tell them what you've been able to discover about him going up there. He went up there with his son Robert, and we're going to continue to call Bobby Bobby, but he has a son whose name is Robert. And then there's this friend Andrew. Just describe what happened that day, January 19th, 2009.
Okay, well, from what I've been told, Bobby had knew somebody who was interested in purchasing a dirt bike that Andrew owned. And so Bobby, Andrew, and Robert got up in the morning, early in the morning, and drove from here up to Humboldt to Alderpoint to sell the dirt bike. They went up there, sold the bike, had went, like Bobby kind of took them and showed them places, like kind of where he goes, like right there, like where Virginia's house was, where Dustin's house was, and kind of showed him another place where he had built like a little addition onto someone's, like I think it was a tree there, but he built like a little addition, a room on there, and so he was just kind of showing them kind of what he did when he was there. They had lunch while they were there. And then Andrew and Robert came back, and Bobby stayed, and he told them he would be back in a few days. And then he never, at that point, that was the last time any of us heard from him.
And did he give, I mean, being that one of these people is his son, and let's just maybe, how old was his son Robert at the time that this happened, roughly?
I want to say I think he might have been about 16.
All right, so a young kid. Okay, so at least, please.
Oh, I was going to say he was a teenager.
Okay, so he wasn't quite of age, like 18 or anything, so 16 might have still been maybe just getting into high school. And then this friend Andrew, we're not going to use his last name. Andrew, how old do you think he is, or was at the time, I should say?
I don't know his exact age. I would say early 20s, because he's fairly young himself.
Okay. And this would have been this Andrew is somebody Bobby knew, or somebody that his son Robert knew?
He has lived here his whole life as well, so everybody knows him. Families are connected.
Okay. So 2 guys, Bobby goes up there with 2 guys obviously he trusts, his son and this guy Andrew, who's been around Keys his whole life. Andrew has a motorcycle to sell. And it was Bobby who found the buyer
Correct.
All right, so they drive up there 5 hours, sell this motorcycle, maybe a little far to go to sell a motorcycle, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Bobby shows them around, but then he says he's going to stay up there, and Robert and Andrew come back to Keys. Did Bobby give them any reason as to why he was going to be staying there, and when did he say he'd be coming back?
My understanding is that he was staying there because he was going to collect money that somebody there owed him. I don't know who owed him or even why, but he had said he would return. He was supposed to take the bus back in a few days.
In a few days. So it wasn't going to be later that day or maybe even the next day, maybe January 20th, maybe it could have been January 21st that he'd be coming back on the bus.
Yeah, I don't think he had an actual set day. He was just going to be a few days and be back. So it would have been like less than a week.
Okay. From what you know now, once again, 9 years later, just from your own personal knowledge, do you think it was a surprise to Robert and Andrew that Bobby was going to stay up there? Is that something he said before they got up there, or was that something that seemed like spur of the moment when they already got there?
No, I think they knew he was going to stay. I think that was part of the reason why they drove up there.
Okay, so
he had intentions of staying.
Okay, so kind of killing, maybe you could say, two birds with one stone. Hey, I have to go up there to collect money, and then I also found this guy who would buy your motorcycle. So Bobby gets a ride up there with his son, some good time with his son, hanging out, Andrew, and then they'll come back, and then Bobby comes back a couple days later. To your knowledge, was it normal for Bobby to ride the bus, maybe going up and back?
Yeah.
Pretty standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't have a car, so that was that's how he, according to my aunt, that's how he would go there and come back.
Okay.
I think sometimes he may have rode up with friends that were going that way, and then take the bus back. But pretty much that's how he would get there.
Sure, and he was doing Andrew a favor by finding somebody who would buy Andrew's motorcycle. So, all right, so he did the guy a favor. You had already said he said that he maybe needed to collect some debt. Maybe he did some work up there. Somebody was going to pay him, but even to this day in 2018, we don't know who that person is. And in fact, maybe that wasn't. It might be true, but being that we don't know who the debtor is, it's hard to say. We don't know who owed Bobby money.
That's correct. We didn't.
Okay. So he said he'd come back later, and of course, he never came back. When did Bobby's family, maybe his son Robert, maybe somebody else, maybe his parents, start to get a little worried that Bobby hadn't come back? Did anybody that they could have called up there? Did Bobby have a cell phone? What went on in those following days? January, maybe let's say 21st, 22nd.
Yeah, from what I was told, when a few days went by, they hadn't heard from him. He hadn't come. He didn't have a cell phone, so it wasn't like anybody could call him.
Okay.
What ended up happening was after, I think it was about a week or so, like during that first week when he should have been back, Virginia actually had called my aunt and asked if he had came home, like if he was here. And that's how, what really put my aunt on, alert, because the people she thought he was staying with didn't know where he was.
Okay, so what you're saying is nobody called up there, but you're saying Virginia Gann from up in Humboldt County / Alderpoint actually called Bobby's mother to say that she hadn't seen him.
Correct.
Huh.
Correct.
I don't think I knew that until this second. Okay, well, that was considered of her. So she had seen him and then hadn't seen him in a couple days. And of course, Bobby's mother said, no, he's not come back. What happened from there?
At first, not a lot. My aunt, when he still didn't come back, she started calling, different family members asking, if he, maybe he came to their place or something. And then, like I said, I have family that's back east, and she had actually called out there and asked if he had came there because his biological father lives out there. Anyway, he wasn't there, and one of my cousins who lives out there actually called me and was like, "Hey, what's going on? Have you, like heard like what's going on?" Because she called out here looking for him, and that was when I started, to ask questions, and that was when I went over and talked to my aunt and found out that he never made it back, and she didn't know what had happened to him. And at that point, she had already contacted Humboldt County Sheriff's Department and let them know that he was missing. And although I don't think a whole lot happened in that time frame, it took a while to get the ball rolling for them to really consider him missing. At first, they would say things like, it's not illegal for an adult male to not want to be found.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
We hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a common thing you hear with, other families that have had missing people as well. So it took a while before they actually, I think, really considered him missing.
Okay.
And then,
if I may just jump in there for just a moment.
Sure.
So Virginia calls Bobby's mother. She has her phone number somehow. And then Bobby's mother starts calling around to see if anybody else has seen Bobby in the Keys, California area. Nobody has, of course. Nobody's heard from him. And then at what point after January 19th, 2009, would you say that the missing persons report was filed up in Humboldt County? I mean, how many weeks did that take?
See, well, that's where things get a little bit skewed. So my aunt, who has messaged that, talked to them and then has had email correspondence.
Let me just jump in there. When you say your aunt, you mean Bobby's mother?
Correct.
Okay, Bobby's mother. Okay, please continue.
So Bobby's mother has, in her mind, reported him missing because she's spoke to them. She's emailed with them. She's, sending emails saying, "Have you heard anything about my son?" She's thinking he's listed as missing, and like she did what she's supposed to do. So when I became aware that he was missing and I had went over to talk to her, I started asking questions and was like, "Okay, so where's the copy of the missing persons report?" And she thought, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, if they made a report, they should have given you a copy with a case number and, things like that."
True.
So she emails back and asks for a copy of that report. And at that time, she gets told, "You have to file the missing persons report in the county that he lived in." Mind you, this was already in February sometime, I think it was.
Right.
And so several weeks later, towards the end of February. Anyway, so she had to go down to Stanislaus County and make a missing person report. And of course, there's really not much in it other than a description of him and where he supposedly went missing from. So I know in the very beginning, when one of the newspaper articles came out, one of the reporters had questioned, "Well, why does it show he wasn't missing until I think it said March 9th or something like that up there?" And I said, "Good question." Right. So I think he had to. I didn't understand why they didn't tell her that in the beginning, and I never really understood why it took so long to consider him missing and to go out and actually talk to any of these people that lived there.
Sure,
it was just hard to understand that,
Right.
And my aunt was, as you can imagine, pretty upset and emotional at the time.
I bet.
So, and that was kind of when I started helping her because it was difficult for her to try to have these conversations, and it's still difficult for her this day to talk about it.
I bet. So the problem you have is that, once again, the missing persons report wasn't filed until maybe late February. Let's just say maybe February 20th or something after that. And on top of that, you're filing the missing persons report in Keys, California, which is an entirely different county than where Bobby was technically last seen.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it all very difficult. Long time later, and then in a completely different area. Why was it that you personally, if you're part of the family, didn't find out that Bobby was missing for so long?
So, okay, first of all, life just kind of goes on. I work full time, have a
Mm-hmm.
family, very busy day-to-day stuff. I don't typically spend a lot of time, hanging out, socializing with
Mm-hmm.
everybody, like during the weeks and things like that. So, like, I would see him sometimes, like if I'm driving to the store or whatever, if we bump into each other, I always would say hey and talk and stuff, but I didn't necessarily spend a lot of time hanging out. Um, Without going into a whole lot of detail, there's
Mm-hmm.
been, family issues through our years of growing up. There were, we don't always, not everybody sits around and visits with each other a lot.
Right.
So,
Okay.
because I don't personally go over there all the time, it's probably why I didn't know. So
Okay.
it wasn't like I bumped into them and they were like, "Oh, hey," or like, I don't know why nobody told me though. Like, I
Okay.
don't.
All right. That's fine. I guess I have to ask because, I know me personally, I live in an area, I have a brother who lives kind of close to me, 15, 20 minutes away, but my parents and a lot of the family that I grew up with still live in Pennsylvania. I live in Florida, but I think that if, one of my cousins, disappeared, I think I would find out about it fairly quickly, even though I'm like 1,300 miles away. That's all. That's all the reason I'm asking. It wasn't like they were withholding it from you. It just didn't come up, and you weren't around them.
Yeah, I think honestly what's happened is like in the very beginning, my Bobby's mother was one, she's distraught. She's
Yeah.
like an emotional
Sure.
wreck. She part of her doesn't want to believe that he's really missing, and the other part of her is trying to rationalize the fact that he probably is. So I
Yeah.
think what happened was she just in her way had to deal with it before she started actually like
Right.
verbalizing it or putting truth to the fact that he really was missing. And
Right.
then for me, when she reached out to my other side of the family, which is like where his biological dad lives and stuff, I knew like at that point it had to be like something really, really wrong. It was, she wouldn't contact them looking to see if he was there if unless she had to.
Okay. All right. I got it. Let me ask you this. When did and what's the name of the county where Keys is?
Stanislaus County.
Okay. When did they eventually contact Humboldt County, or how did that all work?
I don't know how that worked. I'm sure they did because I think what happened was once she being my Bobby's mother, my aunt, she
Mm-hmm.
went and filed the report and stuff, and then I think then they had to then turn around and submit that report over to Humboldt County. Is how I think it worked, and I think that's probably why Humboldt County shows like a date or somewhere around the 9th of March of him being listed as
Right.
missing.
I've
But
seen
that's
that.
because that's how long it took to get, you know, my aunt first had to be told they're reporting missing over here, and then from there they had to take that report and submit it over there. So it was a long roundabout way of getting it officially done, but she had been talking to Humboldt County since like the end of January, beginning of February.
Okay. All
So
right.
they knew
So,
well before March that he was missing.
okay. Well, good. So they eventually find out about Bobby's disappearance in their area, and so they end up maybe questioning some people, and that's going to take us to the next part of this, being that Virginia Gann called Bobby's mother to kind of get this ball rolling. The police did talk to her son Dustin, who I think they didn't live together, but he lived maybe across the street or something from her. They
That's
did
my
did it.
understanding.
Okay, and what did Dustin have to say about that day, January 19th? He actually saw Bobby after Robert and Andrew already started driving back to Keys. What did Dustin have to say?
He said that obviously they knew he had seen him because they left him there. But he had said that he didn't know what happened to Bobby, but
Mm-hmm.
he had left to go to another property with a man named Chris Harrison, and that he went. I think the place is considered Garberville, and that he left with him, and he didn't see him again after that.
Okay, well that's some. All right, so that's some helpful information. Dustin coming forward. Are you aware of Dustin? I mean, if his mother kind of was looking for Bobby, then I'm guessing maybe Dustin might have been a little concerned about not seeing Bobby as well. Do you even know?
I don't know. I've never spoke to either of them. I only know just minor information that law enforcement shared with me.
Okay, that's fine. And there was something in Virginia's house of Bobby's. What was it? Anything in it?
My understanding was his bag that he had brought there was left at her home, and it was later given to law enforcement. I believe it was Dustin who gave it to them.
Okay.
And they said it was mostly empty. There was almost nothing in it.
Okay, so who knows what he may have been carrying, or maybe he was planning to carry something in it. We just don't know. But it was found. Would you say that this was something like a backpack, something like that?
Yeah, like a small duffel bag is my understanding.
Okay, good. So this bag is there, doesn't really lead anywhere, but that's not unusual because Bobby had gone to Virginia and Dustin's houses. He knew them. Being the bags there's not too unusual, maybe. And then Dustin gives this key piece of information about this guy, Chris Harrison. Who is Chris Harrison, and did the police talk to him, and what do you have to say?
My understanding is that, and it took several weeks before any of this happened, but that they did speak with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the email that I had gotten from the original officer was that they had spoken with him, him being Chris Harrison, and that he had told them that him and Bobby had left Dustin and went to the property that was there in Garberville, which is located, my understanding is on Rancho Sequoia Drive, I believe is what it's called, and it's the place they refer to as Murder Mountain. So
Murder Mountain, just so we're clear, Murder Mountain.
Correct.
Okay.
So the story that the detectives had relayed was that Chris Harrison had said that they went there and that they had taken acid that Bobby brought there himself, and that he had become panicked and wanted to see Dustin, and so he left him alone and went to go get Dustin, and that when they returned, they couldn't find him, and he had wandered off on his own under the influence.
Under the influence of acid, so LSD, like a psychotropic drug, I guess is what you'd call it.
I guess.
Okay.
That felt very strange to me because that wasn't something that I knew of Bobby doing. So it didn't feel right to me.
Okay. And just so we're clear, Chris Harrison says he left and actually went and got Dustin Gann, Dustin that we've already talked about a couple times. He said he went back to Dustin's, then came back.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And Dustin, in his original statement to the police, didn't say anything about that, did he?
I don't know what he has or hasn't said.
Okay.
I know that they did talk to him a few times, but they don't give me all of the details.
Okay. But once again, Dustin, and what you know, he said to the police, he said that Chris just picked Bobby up and that was that. But then Chris is saying that Chris did pick Dustin up, but then Chris came back to Dustin's and got him as well. So their stories conflict maybe at least a little bit. That's all I'm trying to show here. Okay.
Yeah, I think what he meant, what definitely meaning was that he hadn't physically seen Bobby again from that point.
Okay.
I think is what he was meaning.
Okay. And to your knowledge, being that to believe Chris that Bobby walked off into the forest of Northern California and never came back, did Chris ever file a missing persons report himself? Did he ever call anybody to say, you know what, Bobby went out last night and never came back? Anything like that to your knowledge?
No, he did not.
Okay.
In fact, none of them did.
Okay, none of them did. And is Chris saying that anybody else, I mean, he already brought Dustin into this. To your knowledge, was there anybody else at this place who could have seen Bobby just walk off out into nowhere?
No, there's been no mention of anybody else.
Okay.
In his statement, he didn't mention anyone else, and I don't know of anyone else.
Okay. To your knowledge, Chris Harrison, did he ever give any reason why he didn't eventually alert somebody that Bobby never came back? To your knowledge?
No.
No. Okay. And so there weren't any other people there. Did Chris, being that Bobby brought up about somebody owing him money, any idea if Chris was the one who in particular owed Bobby this money, or could it have been Dustin or Virginia that owed Bobby this money? Any ideas regarding any of that?
No, I mean, at this point, it really could have been anybody. We
Okay.
don't know.
Okay. But you do know that the police, of course, did talk to Chris, and that was his statement.
Yes.
That was his statement. Did they ever try to give Chris a lie detector test or a little tougher interrogation back at that time?
Yeah, my understanding is that they tried and he opted not to take it.
All right. He opted out of taking a lie detector test regarding the disappearance of Bobby.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you did tell me that Chris did do something else, though, after Bobby disappeared. He kind of went on a vacation. Where'd he go, and do you know for how long?
Well, I only know like a little bit of information about that. What happened was several years into this, like I think it was 2014, a different detective started working on it, and they actually had how do I want to say this? They had went out with a search warrant to the property, and at that point, we had been told that he was no longer living at that residence, that he had left and went to Hawaii. I guess he had a sister living there. So my understanding was he was over there at that time.
And that's where he was in 2000. And he came back, but my understanding was that Chris Harrison, who seemingly was one of the last people to see Bobby, went to Hawaii not long after Bobby disappeared. I was thinking at least within the year of 2009. Is that possible or not possible? Any ideas regarding that?
No, I think he stayed in the area
Okay.
for a while. I don't know what year he actually went to Hawaii, but he didn't stay there. He came back.
Okay. So he stayed in long enough to deny a lie detector to deny taking a lie detector test. Didn't want to do that, and at some point he got completely out of the area, and then at some point he came back from Hawaii. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about him. Obviously, I don't know if this acid story holds up to scrutiny or not, but being that he didn't call the cops, of course, that's always going to make people a little suspicious. Um, in that when you first or anybody in your family found out or heard about Chris Harrison, had they ever heard Chris's name before he kind of popped up on the radar? Bobby's mother, maybe Bobby's son, maybe this Andrew guy. Had they ever heard the name Chris Harrison before?
Well, previously, I guess apparently Chris Harrison had a nickname. People called him Four Beers. So they had heard that name before.
Huh.
But it wasn't until like after his disappearance that we later found out who Four Beers was, that this was actually his name.
All right, so that was his nickname. Four Beers was his name, his nickname.
Yes.
All right, not three
Apparently
beers, not five beers, but 4 beers.
Correct.
All right, that's fun. That's kind of funny. Okay, 4 beers. Chris, 4 beers, Harrison. Okay, so they knew him by his nickname, and then they find out his real name, and he is definitely somebody that Bobby knew from all of his times going up to the area.
Yeah, apparently so. I mean, okay. I personally had never heard of him. But...
Okay. I realize that. I realize that. So let's get back to this, and this is where this is going to get a little deeper. And it has to do with this motorcycle. Let's not forget why Bobby was up there in the first place. He had ridden up there with his son Robert, and this guy Andrew, because of Andrew's motorcycle that was going to be sold. up in the Alderpoint area. I made the comment before, that's a long way to go to sell a dirt bike. Is it possible there was more going on in this transaction besides the selling of this motorcycle?
At this point, I would say yes, it's possible.
Okay. So something, because the motorcycle did exchange hands, but as I've mentioned already, that's a long way to go. 5 hours to just sell a dirt bike. Especially, how much could a dirt bike go for? So there's that. At the time that this dirt bike was sold in 2009, did anybody, even Andrew and Robert, know the name of the guy they sold the motorcycle to?
No, because that was something I had been trying to figure out. I was trying to figure out who they, who was actually there that day, kind of thing.
Okay.
But they didn't know. They couldn't remember they met more than one person while they were up there, and they couldn't remember who the people were, and honestly didn't seem like they knew who the person was.
All right. So this was even though maybe it's going, I know what the listener's saying. Well, why would that matter? Well, you're going to find out here in a bit. But for a long time after 2009, nobody even knew who this bike was sold to.
Correct.
Okay. That's okay. Nobody knew who it was. That was another part of this mystery. But the motorcycle itself turned up in like 2011 or 2012. Can you explain how that happened?
Yeah. And actually, I want to make a correction. I think it was more like 2014 and 15 because it was after the new detective had started working on the case
Okay.
that it popped up.
All right. In our previous conversation, you thought it was a little earlier than that, but now that you've had a chance to think about it, you're thinking it was maybe even 3 years later after that. So 2014, 2015.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right, in 2014, 2015, please describe how the motorcycle that was sold in 2009 popped up again.
Well, I had gotten a call from another cousin that lives back east, who was friends with Andrew's mom, and she was out there visiting on vacation, and she had mentioned that she had gotten a letter from a storage company that had said that the unit had been defaulted on, like the person didn't pay their rent, and that this motorcycle that was registered to her was inside this unit. So I guess there must be some sort of law or something that they have to notify the owner of like an auto or whatever. So I had told my cousin, I need to ask her which, who owned the unit, where was it, how to contact the place. But she had told her that she didn't know where it was and that she'd thrown the paper away.
So Andrew's mother, the mother of the guy who sold this motorcycle, got this letter but didn't immediately notify anybody.
Right. I mean, I guess she didn't think it was
important at all. When that motorcycle was sold back in 2009, to your knowledge, I guess then that it was never registered, being that Andrew's mother, or his name was still on the title, that it was never registered after it was sold in 2009. So like 5-6 years later, nobody ever registered it.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And to this day, do you even know who owned the storage unit where it was found?
No.
Okay. Any idea where that bike is now?
No, I imagine the storage unit probably got clearance to sell it.
Okay.
When they sell the contents.
Okay, so we're still not clear who bought the bike, but the bike popped up. But being that Andrew's mother didn't know the seriousness of this, she didn't let anybody know. Eventually find out, though, but the bike was long gone by then. So that was a little bit of the mystery, and we're going to solve that part of the mystery here in a bit. But I do want to talk about this. You had mentioned to me in our last conversation that there might have been, somebody might have given Bobby a warning about coming back to Humboldt County. The last time that he was here, seemingly in December of 2008. Anything about this? Do we even know how this actually happened? What can you say about it?
Yeah, well, and again, this is just, as you're aware, a lot of different
A
things get
lot of
said,
rumors.
and it's been
Yes.
unable to be, confirmed or,
Sure.
or even ruled out. But there have been people that had said that he was told not to go back up there, and that supposedly one of his friends who lived up there had came down here, had been in our area, and had told him not to come back up there. That particular person hasn't spoke to the family and doesn't speak to us about it, so there's no way to confirm or deny it.
Okay. And Bobby is, since we've talked about him so extensively, of course, he is the topic of this episode. He never said anything to anybody about being afraid about going up there, ever getting warnings about staying away.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. And in fact, I have to say, being that he went up there with his son, he surely would not have brought his son into what he thought might be a dangerous situation. Even if
I don't believe he would have.
Right. Even if it was just the harmless selling of a motorcycle. So, not sure what to make of that at all, but like you said, in many of these cases, lots of rumors flying around. Lots of rumors. You talked about this warrant that was served in 2014. Do you know why that popped up? What can you tell the listeners about? You've already mentioned it. Let's get a little more into that. What motivated the cops to go serve this warrant?
I don't know what the exact catalyst was for them to go there. I know at the time we'd gotten a new detective working on the case. It had sat seemingly kind of cold for a while. I know the whole thing with the dirt bike had popped up around this time with it resurfacing and that kind of thing. So I think there were several little things. Because you have to keep in mind that the discovery of that dirt bike in the mini storage was the only lead we'd had at all.
Right.
We weren't even able to do anything with it.
Right.
So I think that was kind of why, like, the new person, fresh eyes, was looking at it, and he decided he wanted to take a chance and see if there was anything that he could find there.
Okay. All right, so this warrant was served on the house that Chris Harrison lived in, allegedly the last building that Bobby was seen in. Is that where the warrant was served?
Correct.
And you had already said that Chris wasn't even living there at the time?
No, he'd already, I guess, went to Hawaii or wherever he was staying at the time.
Okay. Do you know, and I don't know if this would have been part of the warrant or not, but when this all popped up about Chris saying, well, Bobby, was on acid and he just stumbled off and yada, yada, yada. Did anybody ever organize any searches? Did anybody go out in any four-wheelers? Has that area, and I realize it's called Murder Mountain, and I want to talk about that in a second. It has to probably be pretty thick. Anybody ever go out into the woods to even see maybe if Bobby just didn't hit his head and die from the elements?
I don't believe so. I know in the beginning they claimed, they being the individuals that knew him and were supposedly around him at the time, said that they had went and tried to look for him. I don't believe anybody ever looked for him, just like they never reported him missing. So,
okay.
In the beginning, I would say no, there were no physical searches for him.
Okay, no dogs, no volunteer searches like putting 200 people together and walking in a line, out from the house in a variety of directions. Nothing like that was ever done.
No.
Okay. All right. And when they served that warrant in 2014, do you have any knowledge if did they bring in like a CSI team to test any of the interior for blood? Did they bring in any dogs? Or was this just humans looking for stuff in the house?
They didn't share all of that.
Okay. Yeah. I have experience, as I've already mentioned, with the Jeff Joseph case. from Humboldt County, and that what you're telling me does not surprise me at all. That they don't reveal a lot of these things, and in fact, with Jeff's disappearance, I really don't know how much work they've really done. I really, to this day, and I of course am still friends with his sister Vicky, who was the guest on that episode like a year and a half ago.
I would like to say though, I'd like to say this.
Hmm.
Although I was very unhappy with the way things were in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
in 2014, when the other detectives started working on the case, I'd just like to say that it was a whole different experience.
Really good.
And
Good.
yes, and at that point, that was the first time I felt like anybody really did anything, or even tried to do anything. And he still to this day works on the case. So I just do.
Okay,
I do want
good.
to say that because I know
All right, please.
I see the stories from other people, and I know what people go through, because in the beginning I felt the same way they did. But I just want to say that there are people who actually want to do their job.
All right. Thank you for putting that on the record. That's good to hear. Thank you. Now, we're going to start to tie all of this up. You're probably wondering, well, there's Chris Harrison, and then why are you talking about the bike? Well, eventually, and we don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but it's certainly a fact. You, along with, of course, Bobby, the rest of Bobby's family, eventually did figure out who the motorcycle buyer was, and who was it?
The motorcycle buyer was actually Zachary Harrison, which is Chris Harrison's brother.
So Chris Harrison, the last guy to allegedly see Bobby, the buyer of the motorcycle was actually his brother Zach.
Correct.
And to your knowledge, in all those years that the police were talking to Chris and Chris was out there and everything, did he ever say anything about his brother being the purchaser of that bike?
No, to my knowledge, it was never mentioned. I don't even know if it was ever asked.
Okay. Well, this is where it even gets, I guess, a little stranger, is how did your family eventually figure out that Zach Harrison was the buyer of the bike on January 19th, 2009? How'd you find that out?
There were newspaper articles, on the internet floating around about basically a manhunt that they were doing in the Humboldt area, and the person they were searching for was Zachary Harrison. And with the mugshot photo, Bobby's son saw the photo and said, "I met that guy."
He recognized. So, all right. So this happened in when? Last year. This happened last year, or this year?
Well, okay. The incident that they were, I'll just say, Zachary Harrison in September of 2017 murdered a man. He was running from law enforcement.
Okay.
So in 2018 is when we found out that he actually was the person that purchased the motorcycles.
And you discovered that when Bobby's son Robert, who was there for the selling of the motorcycle, he recognized Zach Harrison's picture from one of the mugshot photos that Zach had because the police were looking for him.
Correct.
Wow. Can you describe the moment? Maybe I know you are not Bobby's mother, but you are his cousin. You've been involved. You've been involved in this case for many years. Can you describe the moment where you were, what you were doing, when you found out that a murderer was the guy, and he happened to be Chris Harrison's brother? Where were you, and how did that affect you?
I was actually in my aunt's living room. I went over to talk to her about something else, and she had told me that Robert had been at her home and saw the article, because I'd actually shared the article on Facebook, and that's when he'd seen it, and so she had told me. So at that point, I still wasn't certain he had actually purchased the bike, but I was certain that he had been there. So that was, just a little interesting. It was like the first time they were actually able to connect a couple dots. It really didn't lead anywhere other than to that same day. He didn't know anything really further, but it confirmed a few things. So
right.
It was like, okay, which I kind of feel like everything is like that. You might get a piece of information and it feels good to get it, but then you still aren't really any further than you were before you had it.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Okay, so I guess then the best way to describe that day was Bobby, Robert, and Andrew go up there. They meet at least Zach Harrison. They sell this bike. Andrew and Robert come back to Keys. And then Bobby himself goes over to the Gans, and then he ends up meeting up with Zach Harrison's brother, Chris. And like you've already said, in 2017, Zach murdered a guy. His name was Robert Holtzclaw, Holtsclaw, and he was on the run. And Zach was on the run. Was he eventually caught?
He was caught in June of 2018.
So just like 4 months ago.
Correct.
So he was on the run. In fact, I think you told me that he wasn't even really, he was kind of hiding in plain sight. He wasn't like caught in like New Jersey. He was caught right in the area where he was living.
Correct.
Okay. To your knowledge, since Zach was captured in June, do you know, being that, you've been, obviously, like you said, just you have nice things to say about Humboldt County, do you know if Zach has been asked about Bobby's disappearance?
I know he's been spoke to. I don't know the extent of what was asked. I do know that he confirmed that he bought the bike.
Okay. So after all these years, that mystery, although it seems like a bigger deal now that we know who he is. We didn't know, you didn't know how it was connected or not, but now you know who the buyer is, and certainly does look at least a little suspicious, but you now know that. I do need to ask you this, and we're going to talk about a few more things that are, strange about the Harrison family. Do you have any idea why they call that particular area Murder Mountain?
I don't. My understanding was that it started like years ago. There's actually, I think, a book written about it or something. I haven't read it though. But I think over the years, it kind of got that kind of ominous, negative connotation because so many people go missing from that area.
Mm-hmm. They do.
But I don't think that was the original reason that it was called that, though.
Okay, so you believe that it started to be called Murder Mountain well before this rash of disappearances that seem to occur in Humboldt County, and that is true because I've back when we did the Jeff Joseph episode, I had obviously looked at all those disappearances up there. But you think this Murder Mountain name occurred before that?
Yeah, I think that was years ago.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about the Harrison family a little more. In fact, years ago, they had a disappearance in their own family. Who was it and what happened?
Well, my understanding is that their mother had disappeared and hadn't been missing for a couple months before she was found. She was found deceased.
Okay, so she went missing. She was found deceased. Ever know, do we have any idea if she was murdered or did she die from the elements or was it suicide? Do you know?
I don't think that it's known.
Okay.
I couldn't find anything that said. And when I inquired, I was told I think it was like undetermined.
Okay. And then Chris and Zach's father, I don't have his name written down here, but he killed a guy, didn't he?
Well, that's what people say. I was told though that it was a brutal altercation between him and another man, and then the other man couldn't live.
Okay. And in fact, the father claimed self-defense and never did spend any time in jail.
That's what I have heard. But again, I don't know the specifics.
You don't know the specifics of what actually happened, but that is the belief. We're not saying that the father murdered anybody. He wanted revenge or anything like. But he was closely connected to a guy that died, and it might have been self-defense. When Zach Harrison was finally caught, and like you said, he was asked about the motorcycle and everything, did the police have the opportunity after they caught Zach to go back and talk to Chris about any of this? Did they have the opportunity to do that?
No.
And why not?
because Chris Harrison committed suicide in October of 2017.
So the guy that said that the guy that picked Bobby up allegedly at Dustin Gann's place, the guy that says that Bobby walked off, he was hallucinating on acid, committed suicide in October 2017. There was a note left. Please tell the listeners as much as you can, as much as you're comfortable, about finding out that he committed suicide and this note that he allegedly left.
Yeah. We haven't been able to have a copy of the note, so I don't know specifically what's in the note. I only know little pieces that have been told to me.
Mm-hmm.
But he basically, in the note, admitted that he had killed Bobby. And although I don't believe there was technically an apology in the note, he does say that he, I don't know how to explain it. He tells in the note that where he supposedly put him, but it's not like specific and clear. My understanding is it's very vague.
Big area.
Yes.
All right. And we're not going to say where that exactly is, but it's on a piece of property that's probably fairly wooded and several acres.
Correct.
Yeah, and he wasn't very specific about that. But the rumor, once again, you've not seen the note, but maybe through backdoor channels or something like that, it is believed that, I'm going to ask you this again, even though you said it, that he allegedly claims that he murdered Bobby back on January 19th, 2009.
That's correct.
Wow. Do you know, has anybody, once again, any reporter or anybody in Chris Harrison, Zach Harrison's family given any reasons why Chris committed suicide, anything like that?
No, there's been nothing mentioned about it. I mean, there wasn't even, there was no news article or anything like that about it when it happened. Like, if it hadn't been for the detective telling me that he, had been found deceased, we wouldn't even have known.
Right. When did you find out like the day after they found Chris Harrison dead, or did it take like a month or something to find out that he committed suicide? I mean, how do you remember it? I mean, that was only like a year ago now. What do you remember?
It was actually probably about four days later, I believe.
Okay.
And someone had went on Facebook and posted what they posted was actually that he had been murdered and left in the woods, but that was false information. Turned out, I contacted the detective who then called me and then confirmed that yes, he'd been found deceased and that it was suicide.
Wow. So, of course, once again, we have the note, but so a guy who, one way or the other, I mean, whatever happened to Bobby, one of the last guys to see Bobby is no longer with us, and so that's one less witness, that can be continued to be questioned and searched, forever. So this is...
There's no way to ask
them
anything. I always had thought there would be a day where we'd get to have a conversation.
That's right. I guess what I'm saying is if this disappearance is going to be solved, you're going to have to do it without Chris Harrison.
Correct.
Is there anything going on in your family, whether from Bobby's mother or anybody else, who are trying to get to see the full note that Chris wrote?
I inquired if we could have a copy because I'm aware that Trinity County, which is where he was found deceased, released a copy of the note to his sister. I had asked the detective handling Bobby's case if our family could have a copy and was told that it is entered as evidence and that we would not be able to have a copy of it until the case was adjudicated, which means solved. Or we would have to petition the court and that they may or may not give us a copy. So I then later actually ended up through a news article about Zach, saw one of his sisters was making comments, and so I had commented to her. And then her older sister had messaged back and allowed me to contact her privately. And I had asked her for a copy of the note, but she told me she no longer had the note.
So you've actually been in contact. I apologize. Please say that again.
She said she had thrown the note away, and so she couldn't share that with us.
Okay. So you've actually had some conversations with Chris and Zach's, at least one of his sisters, a couple of his sisters.
Yeah, they have two. So yeah, you can say they were conversations, but they were very short.
Okay.
Basically, what had happened, the private conversation with the older sister was more or less she just sent me screenshots of a email conversation or private message through Facebook conversation she had with someone else who had emailed her and asked her a bunch of questions. So she just forwarded that. It was more or less like got to read what they had said to each other. So it wasn't like an open dialogue that was going back and forth.
Okay, so just to understand it, you wanted a series of questions answered, and she really didn't specifically answer them. She just gave you conversations she had with somebody else.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Have any of these people in Zach or Chris's family expressed the idea that they believe that Chris could have done something to Bobby? Did the sisters in so many words? I mean, I know what the note says, but you haven't seen it, so that doesn't help. We don't know. But the sisters themselves who have seen the note, do they believe that Chris did something to Bobby? Do you know?
I don't think the younger sister knew anything about Bobby because she was really young.
Okay.
She actually had said that to me, on the little internet news article where I had messaged her. But I don't really know what they said. I do know they were asked, or at least the older sister was asked if she knew why or what reason he would have to harm him. And I don't know that she necessarily knows for certain, but I think she has to. She had said that there was a possibility that he may have harmed Bobby as a way to get back at someone else for their involvement in their mom's disappearance. But that didn't make any sense to me at all.
Nothing that once again, you've been working on this for years. You don't know that Bobby could have ever been connected to anything like that, right?
Yeah, no. It didn't make any sense at all. Yeah. And like I said, when I inquired about what actually had happened to her mom, the law enforcement seemed like my understanding is she had a history with some drug issues and things like that, and maybe I don't believe it was looked at as anything other than a disappearance, and then they found her, and it was not able to determine what happened.
Their mother who disappeared, and a few months later she was found deceased. We don't know if she was murdered, suicide. We just don't know. And
law enforcement didn't seem to think it was anything to do with murder. Like it didn't.
Okay.
They didn't.
Okay.
Again, I don't know any of the facts about any of that.
Okay. Let's go back to the note for a second. When the police said that they're not going to allow you to take a look at the note because it's being used in evidence in a case, when they say that, do they mean the case of Bobby's disappearance, or do they mean that in the case of Zach murdering a guy? What case do you think they mean?
They're meaning Bobby's case.
They're meaning Bobby's case. Okay, because I should mention that as far as the timeline goes, Chris committed suicide in October of 2017. Well, it was just the month before, in September of 2017, when Zach murdered Robert Holtzclaw. So it could be seen, I'm just going to theorize here, which I don't like to do too much, but could it be that maybe Chris had something to do with Robert's murder, and then he felt guilt about it, killed himself, or maybe found out that Zach did it, thought he might be called as a witness, or maybe Chris was just committed suicide because he was depressed or he was into drugs or something. We don't know.
I have no idea.
Right. But it is, I have to say, as far as the timeline goes, it is fairly strange that his brother murders somebody, goes on the run, and then the next month the other brother commits suicide. So it would seem to me that it's connected somehow, but I don't know how. What effect has this had on your family, Tammy, since this happened in 2009? It sounds to me like you are close with Bobby's mother and maybe, his siblings or his children. What has the last 9 years been like?
Honestly, it's changed, I think, all of us a lot. I mean, I think you look at people differently. You question things a little differently. You find through the years that people you thought were good friends aren't really as good friends as you thought they were. Our lives changed a lot when he disappeared. Um, you know, it's like missing a piece of you. Someone who had been a staple in your youth and in your entire life, really, and all of a sudden he's gone. He's I don't know how to explain it real good, without getting upset about it, but our lives all changed because he disappeared, and then his girlfriend moved away, out of state with his kids. So it's not even like the younger ones aren't even here. Like we didn't. You lose the opportunity to share basically the rest of your life with your family member, but then you lose his children too because their lives changed. They're not. Whereas, like, they would have still been here. If he was here, they would have been here.
Right.
So it's just like a trickle-down effect for the whole family. It's hard. People want to ask you, about him still to this day. They'll ask, and it's always difficult because it's just a constant reminder that he's not coming back. My aunt still to this day can't talk about him without just crying. It's difficult. And then you have like all this information, and you still miss that one piece to put it together.
Yeah. Right. I think that's a good way to put it. You have all this information, but you're still missing that piece of information that can make this at least a little bit go away. Of course, probably think that maybe Bobby isn't with us anymore. I mean, you hold out hope, maybe something where he's out there, but that piece of information that maybe can solve this, just 9 years, no answers.
I just wish one of them would have a heart and just, even if they had to do it anonymously, tell somebody where they put him. He doesn't belong there. I'd like to bring his remains home to my aunt and put an end to all of it.
Do you believe that Zach Harrison knows what happened to Bobby?
Honestly, I think they all know. Whether they were directly involved or indirectly, they at least knew after the fact what happened to him.
Okay.
And I just wish one of them would be a decent person and say something.
Do you think that the police have thought about, once again, since Zach was finally tracked down, and I know he's been charged with some serious offenses, and I don't know if he's pleading not guilty. I don't know what the status is of him right now, whether there's going to be a trial, whatever. But do you think that the guy who is working, or a woman, I don't know if it's which, but the detective that's working on Bobby's disappearance, maybe you give Zach a little bit of a break if he does know something? Has that ever been brought up being done?
There's been no mention about it.
Okay, well, maybe there's a thought. Maybe that's possible because Chris isn't with us anymore, and I personally am inclined to believe that if Zach Harrison murdered a guy, if that's actually what happened last year, then I'm very open to the idea that he at least knows something about Bobby's disappearance. That there's still that possibility that a living person can help, somebody who knows something, and has a reason maybe at least to talk a little bit, maybe to get a little break on the long sentence that he's going to be serving. That's just a thought, just something to think about. maybe the next time you talk to your detective. Do you have a Facebook page or anything like that set up for Bobby, Tammy?
Yeah, I don't actually run that Facebook page, but it is Find Robert Tennison.
Okay. And who does it? Do you know who does run it?
Yeah, it was a friend of my aunt's.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, that's fine too. So, find Robert Tennison, and once again, that's his. We've been referring him to as Bobby, but Robert, of course, is his real name. But we wanted to keep it easy for this interview, being that his son is also named Robert. So, all right. I will make sure that people go there, check that out, and share it, and start following it. Tammy, any final words before we complete this interview?
No, I guess I think I already said what I needed to say. I just wish that someone could find it somewhere in themselves to share what they do know, so that this could be closed and be finished.
Okay. All right, Tammy. And I want to thank Vicky Joseph for. I think she was the one that kind of directed you my way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd actually met her through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we share similar
Right.
experiences.
That's right, you do.
That's how I met her.
That's right, you do. Yeah. Okay. I really like Vicky. Haven't talked to her recently, but she's one of my favorite guests, and I appreciate her pointing you in my direction. And I hope Unfound can help in some way. And Tammy, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Right, I appreciate you allowing us to share Bobby's story.
Tammy, you're very welcome.
And that was my interview with Tammy Langford, cousin of Bobby Tennison. I appreciate her joining me and all of you on this episode. And I need to thank Vicky, sister of Jeff Joseph, who told Tammy about Unfound. I hate to sound like a broken record on these types of cases, but I continue to be astounded in these cases where drugs are at least on the periphery, that friends seem to make friends disappear. Or at the very least, these friends who see the missing person last come up with testimony that doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus, they don't want to take lie detector tests, they don't take part in any searches, they don't arrange searches themselves. Is this really how all of us would react if one of our own friends went missing? Definitely not. So, we have a suicide note where Chris claims responsibility for Bobby's disappearance, but the areas where he claims he put Bobby have been searched and nothing has been found. We have Zach, the brother, who is actually a murderer, but no one has put Zach at Chris's on the night Bobby disappeared. We have Bobby allegedly needing to collect a debt and maybe also picking up some marijuana, but he leaves his bag at Virginia Gans. And we have 3 guys who traveled 5 hours to sell a motorcycle. You really mean they couldn't find someone in Keys to buy it? It's not like they were trying to sell an expensive rare Corvette. And the guy Bobby knew just happened to be a future murderer. Meaning, nothing quite adds up. And maybe that's the point. That's the reason the area is known as Murder Mountain. If everything up there in that area of Northern California made sense, it wouldn't have that name. With that, I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.